Hello and welcome to the Vote Common Good podcast. We're mobilizing people of faith to make the common good their voting criteria and to pursue faith, hope, and love for a change on Election Day and prevent the re-election of Donald Trump. Today's episode is an interview with Pastor Mike Baughman, who just recovered from COVID-19. He and host Doug Padgett talk about Mike's experience battling the virus, the importance of social distancing, and what church and society might look like after this crisis is over. Be sure to head over to votecommongood.com. Even though the bus tour is on pause, there are so many digital ways to get involved. We need people of conscience to wake up, speak up, and stand up for a change on Election Day. So we're really glad to have you. Let's jump into the interview.
Well, hey, friends, Mike and I are going to talk about the fact that he has suffered from the coronavirus and now is here to talk about it. And I think that's pretty great, frankly. So, Mike, congratulations on
well, thanks, man.
On beating the very disease that has caused a worldwide pandemic. I feel like you're going to be walking around like the few with the antibodies of immunity that the whole world is looking to have. I don't know if you're already seeing yourself in those terms, but
yeah, I mean, I am kind of looking forward to getting back out there in the world with a sense of
impenetrable invulnerability.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there in the broader world and encountering things with a certain invulnerability. I feel like I've got this extra superpower now of not being contagious. I want like a sign or something like that lets folks know it's okay. I'm supposed to be out. My doctor says so, or something.
Yes, right. Well, this is like the thing that so many people have been asking about is can a person ultimately, if they've had the virus, get back out in the world? Maybe, Mike, this as someone who has survived the virus. Does that mean that you are that if somehow you were to get it again, like you picked it up, would your body eliminate its damaging qualities right away, or could you still be a spreader? Do you know the answer to that yet?
From what I understand, based on conversations with my own physician, and then also with the 4 or 5 friends of mine who are physicians who have checked in on me while I went through this all, who are all wonderful and great. They don't have anything obviously 100% definitive regarding COVID-19 because it's still relatively new, but predominant germ theory and other viruses that are other coronaviruses, other ones in this SARS strain, right? Like anything that's even vaguely similar to it. Once people have had it once, their body knows how to produce the antibodies that kill it right away.
Okay.
And so there isn't a threat of catching it again. There isn't a threat of spreading it in all likelihood, at least for a period of years. Sometimes those immunities wear down over time, but at least in the initial stage, it should be well and good.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible, actually. All right, so first things first. Are you all the way better? Are you feeling totally healthy and back at it?
Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks, and I feel completely back to normal. The initial symptoms were rough. I mean, it started with achiness. It was a classic course. It started with achiness, and then I started to get the splitting headache, and then I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was doing things to open up my airway, sitting differently in my chair. I was doing this weird thing with my face. My wife wondered what I was doing. And then I realized I'm not quite catching enough breath. And then the fever started and I realized what was likely happening.
So when did those symptoms come on for you?
Challenges set in.
When did the symptoms show up for you?
It was right at the end of March.
So people, you were well aware of coronavirus symptoms at the time, was this still? Were you still wondering what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, the initial symptoms, I describe it as a creepy bastard because it comes up on you. Something like my body aching. I had plenty of body aches just from stress in the previous month or so that I didn't think much of it. And the headache, I ran low on coffee this morning. Maybe that was it. Or, it's easy to dismiss the initial symptoms.
Yeah.
And then after the bulk of the really nasty ones of the shortness of breath, the difficulty, pain with breathing, headaches, fever, once those passed, I had a really strong lingering fatigue for a while too. That like I'd wake up in the morning and be like, great, I can do a normal day. And then I would, I don't know, do email for an hour and then need to nap for 4. And it just knocked me on my butt for a good long time.
So you had to live in quarantine in the house, and you have children and a wife, and how did you possibly manage that? That's one of the great fears I think all of us have, is what would you do? Like how'd you get around and eat?
I mean, I'm very lucky to have we have enough space that I could just, basically take over the bedroom that my wife and I normally share. And so she, slept on a couch for a week or so. And I just lived in my bedroom and bathroom and just stayed in that space. There's a little balcony behind me. You can see the light coming through there. So I had a little outdoor space too. So in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't, handling the isolation and the quarantine was okay. I grew up as an only child, so I was like prepared for this, I guess. But
I've heard that,
and then
from
my
people
family was amazing.
I've heard that from people that are like, they prefer time to themselves. They're like, actually, I'm thriving. This whole quarantine business is really working out for me.
Right. Yeah.
Did you actually have a test that confirmed the disease, or do you you have it by the symptoms?
Yeah, I did. I had a doctor's appointment via Skype with my doctor, and then she ordered the test. And so the next day, I went into a testing facility, and they stuck a cotton swab in parts of my head I didn't know existed.
I've heard that they go way up into that nasal cavity.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I felt it for a solid day or so afterwards, but it was intense. But I did I sort of ask for it. One of my friends, who's an assistant professor at UT Southwestern, she told me to tell the folks doing the test, like, to torture me. Don't be gentle about it. And
because
so
you wanted the
stupidly.
Best. Yeah, okay.
I wanted the best results, and I made a noise from the back of my nasal passages I didn't know a human being could make. It was not impressive on my end, but the test, it took a week, or just shy of a week. It was 6 days before the test results came back, and at that point I was largely past it. But it did confirm that I indeed had coronavirus.
Wow. So you're confirmed that you have it, and did that cause additional worry for you? Like, did that really create lots of additional concern, or were you, by the time you got the test, were you already up to the point where you figured, okay, this is coronavirus?
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty sure that it was coronavirus. The relief up front end that I wasn't deluding myself. So it was kind of good to get the clear sense, yes, this is what you have. There's also the sadness and challenge that comes with that too, because then my family is quarantined for a solid week after that, where they can't leave the house for any reason whatsoever. So weirdly, I can leave the house now to go like get groceries and things like that, but no one in my household is supposed to leave at all.
Really?
Because they were in the same building as me, who had coronavirus.
Huh.
So on Wednesday, they'll be able to like be at a just kind of normal level of shelter in place instead of a full quarantine.
And are you supposed to stay away from them now as well, or you're free to roam about the cabin as you see fit?
No, I'm free to roam about the cabin now. So I'm definitely bouncing around, and I haven't left the house very much because we're still trying to observe shelter in place where we can. And I've been giving myself time to continue to recover because I still get little lingering things here and there. But one of the advantages of having the test and having it confirmed is that now my plasma is apparently super valuable and helpful to folks. Because old methods of treating disease is that the antibodies for COVID-19 that my body knows how to produce are running rampant in my body right now. So after another week, I think it is, I'll be able to donate plasma that can then be given to 2 different patients who are in intensive care who are having a hard time battling COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And most cities have some sort of facility set up where plasma donations are possible. In Dallas, it's UT Southwestern. So I'll be donating as much plasma as I can.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Passes.
A few years ago, I had hepatitis A, and there are 3 kinds of hepatitis. They're not in levels of difficulty like 1, 2, and 3. It's A, B, and C, and so they're different diseases of virus of the liver, and it's very valuable. Your plasma, when you have the antibodies fighting off one of these viruses, is really valuable. So I made 3 different trips while super sick with hepatitis A, could barely walk. I had to fly to Johnson City, Tennessee, and for 2 back-to-back days donate plasma and then fly home.
Wow.
Company spent $1,000 per flight, plus 2 nights in a hotel room, plus cars to pick me up and drive me back and forth for 4 weeks in a row to get my plasma at this. And there's only like 3 places in the country that do this plasma testing because it's so valuable for test kits and for all the other things that they have to do to find people that actually have these diseases. So I'm sure that what you have in your body right now is just the greatest level of importance to people. So I would imagine people are in touch with you, are they? Are they reaching out and saying, hey, can you please start donating? Or is that something you're supposed to be initiating?
Yeah, I initiate it. And so there's a website that for UT Southwestern here in Dallas that I filled in all of my information. When was my test date? Who administered the test? When did symptoms end? Stuff like that. And then I believe they contact me once enough time has passed that I'm kind of like at the prime for antibody production.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. So how did you get it? Do you know? What's your best guess?
We've got a couple possible ideas. One that seems pretty likely was I made a trip to the grocery store a couple days before it took place. Also, I had a son my oldest son is in college. He had to go up to New Jersey to clear out his dorm because they were turning his dorm into a hospital. So he was up in New Jersey, came back. I spent time interacting with him. Who knows exactly? But
yeah. So as far as you know, he hasn't shown the kinds of symptoms yet. So if he had the virus, then he had the lesser symptoms.
And he's like 19 and invincible, so he might have just coughed once and been fine. I don't know.
Oh, well, hey, I'm wanted to talk to you on the podcast and the live stream here because I think people are super interested, right? They want to put a face to this. A lot of us don't yet know people who've had the virus or have even heard someone talk about what it's like to have the virus. Some of us are just now hearing, maybe a friend's family member had it or someone is sick with it, or people kind of wonder if they have it. Well, how do you talk about, do you feel a little bit like caught between like, I can be super helpful now that I have these antibodies of this pandemic? Or does it feel a little bit like, shit, I had coronavirus? Like, are people, do you feel weird about that, having that actual disease?
I feel more in the former, excited to be able to get out and help where I can. But with it, but along with that also comes a much stronger sense of wanting to tell other people, like, stay home, just stay home. Right. So I had, I lead, I guess I still call it a new church start, but we're about 7.5 years old. And it's a fully functional coffee shop in Dallas. Its name is Union. And while, we during the shelter in place, we've gone to just walk up windows or order only, nobody in the store, things of that nature. And I've stayed out of Union completely over the past several weeks because, it's not necessary that I be in shop. I could do most of my work remotely. But I developed symptoms for coronavirus on a Tuesday. And on both the Sunday and Monday, the days right before, I very seriously considered going into Union just to check on how things are going, see things for myself, maybe pop up a workstation and work there for a while, make sure the baristas know that I'm kind of in it with them, so they can kind of see me, stuff like that. And good Lord, am I glad that I didn't pop in just to pop in.
Right.
Because had I gone in on Sunday and Monday, if I started showing symptoms on Tuesday, in all likelihood, I was very contagious on Sunday and Monday. And I could have spread it to everyone who works at Union. I could have contaminated the whole building, as well as possibly contaminated customers. It's just one of those things. If you have the privilege of being able to stay home, stay home.
Yeah, for sure. Have you done any contact tracing yet of people that you did see for the few days before your symptoms were evident?
Fortunately, I saw nobody during those times other than family members. So only my house, really.
Oh, fantastic.
Because I had stayed in, but I was this close to hopping in my car and driving into Union a bunch of times on that Sunday and Monday. Yeah.
So it's curious, right? Like, this is such a contagious virus. At least that's the assumption, right? And like, you got it in a way you don't know. But then other people in your own house didn't seem to come down with symptoms on, having been with you on Sunday and Monday before you knew your own symptoms to pull yourself away. This has got to be the part that's just, for epidemiologists and people that track all this has got to be the part that's just confusing as can be for them.
Right.
And for all of us, frankly, to try to kind of get a hold of this. Like, how can one person in a house have it, but then I'm not supposed to go to the park because I'm so contagious, but then people in their own house don't seem to have it. So you know what I'm getting at?
I would say, though,
what do you know about this?
On the flip side of that, one of the things that, because we have members of our family who are have asthma or underlying conditions, things like that, because my in-laws were living with us for a while, who are older, we were already using lots of precaution, even though I didn't necessarily have any symptoms. So I was washing my hands all the time. All of us were. I was avoiding hugging my kids because I knew I was the greatest threat. I already had a lot of measures in place. So I guess what that might be is just a testimony to what the epidemiologists say. Like, wash your hands, man. It matters. And be careful about who you're touching and stuff like that.
Yeah, boy. I mean, right. It's so, this is such a great story because in one sense, people have said just sort of repeatedly, the reason that I'm doing all these things is I don't want to get the disease, right? That's sort of the first so many people have. But your point is, well, whatever experience you had that put you in contact with the virus, it very well may have been your smart distancing and cleanliness actions that kept other people in the house from getting it. Huh.
Yeah, there's a good chance. It's hard to know what else would have prevented it.
Yeah, like this has come very close to you, and it's much more distant to me. So people like me can sit around and sort of prognosticate about what we think is going on. But it still feels like we don't really know what's going on with this virus, right? Like, it feels to me like, man, we're not totally sure of what's the what here, and how this is really all going down. Do you have that sense that there's still just a lot that we don't know from? I'm guessing you watch the news and updates on all this, and maybe watch it with a kind of concern that some of us can't even muster.
Yeah, there's definitely, measures of uncertainty and not knowing, especially how it's going to spread and affect everything else. I'm more concerned by what we don't know that we should know, right? Like, we don't know how prevalent it is because we haven't effectively been testing people.
Right.
And when we compare that to other countries or even particular parts of the United States where testing has been super active, where they have executed shelter in place early, and we see like the curve flattening in those places. I think we know a lot more than we think we do. It's just whether or not we're going to act on what we know. Because it's quirky. All diseases, I suppose, are quirky, and I'm not an epidemiologist or a doctor. But I'm also really careful about, and I've been working really hard at teaching my kids to be careful about like what sources you're paying attention to for facts regarding this. You know, at one point, one of my kids came in and said that she had seen something where I should really like start using a hair dryer and blowing it up my nose because
I just heard about this one. Yes.
Right, which is ridiculous on so many fronts, right? Like a little base understanding of how germ theory works, and it's ridiculous. And I was like, okay, first of all, where did you hear that from? Because and then secondly, let's talk about why that's probably not accurate. And you know, one of my other kids has definitely had some moments of, I mean, real deep concern and fear around the spreading amongst the family, even before I got it. And then when I got it, it was, you know, a much deeper level of concern. And so then we just started to have a conversation where I asked her questions like, well, what are all of your fears with this? What's the worst scenario? What leads you to think that? And then walking her through evaluating the sources that have been fueling the fear and talking. And so one of the things that she identified is when she shifted over to only reading things from
Sean
say
Hannity.
like the CDC or Sean Hannity's huge in the Baughman household. When she
the Sean Hannity newsletter is wrestled for in the Baughman household.
Oh man, we get it. It's we celebrate, we pass it around.
Copies.
It's fantastic. Yeah. But when she shifted over to just reading stuff from the WHO, from the CDC, from, you know, Johns Hopkins or whatever these different sources were, her anxiety's lowered. And so I think that in lots of circles, it's easy to get into that hype and fear of what's unknown. But I think if we hone in on with what the experts are saying, they're really consistent. They're saying the same things. And if we pay attention to that, I think it reduces our anxiety and helps us know how to act.
Well, boy, it sure does for me. I think it's great advice. You know, that video that you're referring to, the one that I heard about that refers to this hair dryer business.
Right.
Apparently that was big on YouTube. Lots of people watching it. And then YouTube took it down, but then other versions of it have shown up on other websites. And one of the things people have done is to apply the WHO and CDC images onto the video, pitching it as if it's coming from the CDC and the WHO.
Who wins in that scenario?
I mean, truly, you just think, and so then here's some poor person says, no, I saw it. It said the CDC right on the video. That's who it's from. Because they put the little logo down in the corner. You know?
Right.
Man, I mean, it's this is the world that we live in, right? Is that, and these are, you know, your kids and others, sometimes these are recipients of this bad news, this deceptive news. They are just trying to do the right thing, right? They're trying to learn. They're trying to be updated. They want to understand. And then there's all this nonsense going on. And I don't know how you feel about, you know, the president's treatment of this, but I feel like that guy is a disinformation machine on all of it. Like, I feel like the president is causing all kinds of trouble when it comes to people's base understanding of what's going on with this illness. So it's, you know, when you feel like, if you do like I do, like you have to wrestle against the official statements of the executive branch, and then kind of hoping that maybe the guy who works for the task force is going to tell you the truth. Like we have to parse out who's talking in the meeting, if you should believe the person or not, you know. It's just, this is so off the hook. It just feels bizarre to me.
I mean, I think in the political realm, and then beyond that, I think in our personal lives, in our church lives, and our social lives, I mean, in so many different places, though, I feel like this is one of those very apocalyptic moments in the truest sense of the word apocalyptic, right? Mm-hmm. That, I mean, the fancy things that we learn in seminary, that that apocalypse just means an uncovering, right? Like an unveiling of that which is just beneath the surface, but isn't named or seen. And I think in these times when society kind of stops and functions in a different way, or times that it reveals things about the nature of politicians. And, you know, I've heard folks in the medical field who have been so dumbfounded and disappointed by various politicians that they're just in a point of like, I can't support that anymore. I don't know how this person could say those things as a politician. And I'm not just talking about like national politics. I mean, even like local city council members and things like that I see in some places where there isn't this party affiliation. So I think that like it's revealing of that, but also family dynamics.
Oh, wow.
Whether it's pastoral care that I've had with folks who come from blended families of some form and how things come out there, or even just kind of internal to a family system when they're suddenly trapped with each other for an extended period of time. I think it kind of reveals things that weren't obvious before. And there's this pressing question for churches that a guy named John Thornburg, who's amazing. He works for Texas Methodist Foundation. He's a poet, musician turned consultant, which are the best kinds of consultants out there because, right, like who's a better prophet than a poet who can just sit there and listen and then like offer back what they're hearing. And, he's been identifying that for a lot of churches, especially those that struggle, that don't have a true sense of self and identity and what it is that they do even in the community. Like eventually they figure out how to do Zoom worship or Facebook Live or something like that. And once they get over that hub and they figure out how to get people to donate online, next is this a deeper question of, well, what do I do now? Right. Like so much of the resources and effort of the organization is into creating the Sunday morning thing.
100%. Yes.
Don't have a deeper identity. Like there's something like, oh, what is that? Is that really all I exist for?
Mm-hmm.
And all that our congregation exists for? And what's our deeper role and place? And so I don't know, man. It just feels super apocalyptic and revelatory right now.
Totally.
Every level.
Like I can't imagine, and other than people, like you who have survived the virus and have the antibodies, I don't know how people are going to shift back to just normal engagement with one another. Like when they lift social distancing, whether that's in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, what good is it having a test? I mean, look, I want us to have a test. I think I buy the theory we need 20 million tests a day happening in this country because we have 300 million people. So every 10 days, everybody needs to be being tested so we can quarantine, you can test, identify, quarantine, and protect, right? That's the only way forward until you get to a virus, until you get to a vaccine. So however long that's going to be. But what good is a test going to do me if I'm like, oh, I've never had the virus. I did the antibody test. Never had it. Don't currently have it. So then what do I do? I guess stay home or stay away from people. Well, how do you run an economy? How do you run a normal life when the fear that I have on this day, the 13th of April, I'm going to have this fear on the 13th of June. What is going to be any different on the 13th of June than the 13th of April or the 13th of July, or heaven forbid, the 3rd of November? What's going to cause people to say, oh, I still don't want to get the virus and I still don't want to spread it to someone. So unless we shift our mindset in the country that it's okay now that you get the virus, because whatever it is that we've determined, like we have a test so you could then be quarantined, or we have some kind of a medicine, or we have some kind of a hospital system that won't collapse. So getting the virus will now be okay. I don't know, Mike. I don't know how you've thought about this because you're, leading edge once again by having already have the antibodies. But I just don't know what the answer is for anyone other than the country getting ready to say, no, 80% of the people are going to have to get this virus. And ideally, we're going to get it in the next 6 months, or else why not just wait for the vaccine and stay in shutdown for a year? I don't know how this all plays out. And I spend way too much time watching stuff about this and listening to it and reading different theories and plans and all. And I am totally without any hope that this country is going to get back to anything close to normal before there's a vaccine. How are you viewing that? Do you have a different take on it?
No, I mean, it's weird. Like, so I have two quick thoughts on that. I mean, one is we operate a coffee shop as a significant source of revenue for us and a significant way that we kind of connect in mission and ministry with people around us. And so, figuring out what's that going to look like. Like right now, it looks like it sucks, right? We have a walk-up window. We have like a third of the sales that we had before. And we're trying all sorts of creative things to do delivery and to send gallons of drinks out to nonprofits that are still operating. And, that's all helping. But, are people going to meet again? Are they going to want to sit in a crowded coffee shop? Are they going to want to rent conference rooms for, day-long meetings where they're in the same room with other people? And
our authors going to want to come and have book meetings in your
That's
fantastic facilities.
Exactly. And so, we have all of those practical questions right now with no answers for it. And then I think too, like there's this interesting thing that I'm just kind of curious about. How is this going to play off on generational influence for, say, millennials and the generation that follows in particular? The majority of the work that we do at Union is with both from our customers and then also from our congregation, our folks in their 20s and into a little bit early 30s. And contrary to whatever, all the bullshit that's out about millennials all the time in news sources, I mean, they are more cautious than anybody else I know. At least the ones that I know are way more cautious about going out, being in, gatherings of people. They're certainly not having parties at each other's houses. And when they do gather, they stay like literally 20 feet apart and kind of shout at each other. I mean, it's almost comical. And they're taking it really seriously. And the whole I'm untouchable, this won't affect me, that is not their mentality. So I'm really curious in the long run of a generation that will always remember, my kids will always remember
totally.
The 2 months, the 3 months, whatever it is that they just stayed at our house the whole time.
Right, the coronavirus kids
from home.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today. Not with 20-year-olds and 26-year-olds, but it's like my friend who has a 3-year-old, and she's saying, noticing when will the zoo be open again? When will the parks be open? This is the kind of thing that will get impressed on a child's mind. Like for me as a child of the 70s, there are just certain things like long lines at gas stations, which didn't last forever. It was a short period of time relative to the 1970s, but I remember the oil crisis and that there wasn't enough oil and people sat in long lines because it impresses upon you as a child. Man, they're a whole generation going to grow up where the notion of a pandemic is not like a fun movie or some sort of a thriller book series. It's like, no, that was horrible. And I remember how the adults around us had no friggin' idea what to do. They didn't know
right
to do. And then somebody will say, and Donald Trump was the president of the United States at that time. And I think a lot of this, I just think, because it's my bias, will get pawned off on that guy was so bad, so incompetent. There's no way a pandemic of this severity and someone as incompetent to run the federal government as him will ever come together again. This will be the narrative that we will tell ourselves to get out of this is, well, it was a certain set of conditions that allowed that to happen. And let's make sure that those never happen again. And I think half of that is true. I think he is probably the most incapable person possibly be in this role. But short of that, I don't know how a kid tells themselves a story that gets them through this. I really don't know how it happens.
Yeah.
Apocalyptic, not in
it's clear we're living in that history
of unveiling. I'm apocalyptic in the sense of what the popular meaning is no, this is horrible breakdown of social structures. And I don't see a way out, man. I'm telling you, I think until there's a vaccine, which, maybe they can press that in by 6 months or something and get one out sooner. But I don't know. Until then, what do? You open an economy to 80% or 60% work, and could Union get by as a coffee shop with just 60% of its revenue? How do you even possibly do that? And you can have any worker there that hasn't had the virus already, and I just can't even see a way forward for what we do unless it's something just really drastic, like everybody just says, look, People are going to die of this thing, and that's that. And that's the way it's going to go. I'm not sure there's something else, because the federal government, the state governments don't seem capable of putting together testing, quarantining, and isolating in a way that allows people to sort of move out into the world and feel confident.
Yeah. I mean, I think
what you experienced, where you had the virus, you stayed home for 10 or 12 days, your body was strengthened and fought it off by creating the antibodies, and now you're able to move about. Unless we say, hey, look, that's what we're looking for, I don't know what the next year possibly looks like.
Well, and I think that is a big part of it, is that we are going to have lots of folks who get sick, who need to be out of work for a couple of weeks. And, that's where issues like paid sick leave are really important. And, the city of Dallas had already instituted mandatory paid sick leave, or actually was supposed to roll out and become official by chance on like April 1st of this year. Oh. Right. So, and things like that do help keep people safe. And I think we'll start to see like why that is so important through things like this and conversations. We've got a couple of medical professionals who are part of our congregation. And a lot of what they've said is that, like, yeah, once things progressively start to reopen, or whatever point that happens, there will be a resurgence of cases. There will be spikes. But the hope is that we always are at a space where then we have enough ventilators to handle it. So that where we have enough medical facilities ready to handle it, where we have enough of these things in place, so that the death rate is much lower. And that's the whole like flatten the curve notion, is just spread it out. You're still going to get a ton of people who have to get it before you get that herd vaccination.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I'm all for it. I'll just say I don't know what's happening around Dallas, but there's not a bunch of buzzing here in Minneapolis of building out capacity. Like if these numbers ramp up here, like some hospitals have added 20 or 30 or 40% more ICU beds. But the numbers they're talking about, that's not going to handle it either. Like I thought they'd be like building out National Guard hospitals at the local shopping mall parking lot. Nothing. They still can't get, like, the idea that we're going to roll this out and there's going to be enough ventilators, but then are there enough of all the other things to make this tolerable for the safety? And, are there enough people to run the ventilators? And look, I've heard 50 to 80% of people who go on a ventilator die anyway. Like, it's really bad. If you've gotten to the point that you can't breathe for yourself and you have to have a ventilator and be intubated, the recovery rate is something like 20 to 50% off the ventilator. So it's not like, hey, if we have enough ventilators, everyone's going to be okay.
Right.
I mean, people are going to freak out at the idea that's why I think hearing your story is encouraging to me, to put a face to it and to see a Lazarus come back from the bedroom, and so people can say, okay, maybe people can get this virus and they're going to be okay. Now, not everyone, and we need to build out enough support so we know that older people or people who have underlying health conditions can be supported and make sure we figure all that out. But I don't know, because you can't slow roll an economy back into practice. It's just, I don't know. And obviously we've never done this, so everyone is making it up. Like, no one knows how you restart an economy, right? It's not like, hey, we should check with the economists about what they do when they shut down a global economy. No one has any idea. I'm just being little Mr. Know nothing common sensor over here. That's like, most businesses I know can't function at 30% or 50% or 80%. No. Like, that's not how it works. Can you?
Yeah.
There's no. You can't have 50% of your office people back, or you can't have 50% of your employees. Like, what would union do if you said we're going to bring back 50% of the employees? Well, then what? One person just works longer, or you cut your hours in half, and then can you make it financially? And I don't know. I think we're in just really a place where we're either going to spend $50 trillion to keep people paying their basic bills for a year in this country, or $100 trillion. Can you imagine?
Incredible.
I don't know. Maybe I should stop talking about it, because I literally don't know. And unfortunately, I don't hear a single person saying, here's how I think this is going to go. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard people say, unless, I don't know what we do. And all of the unlesses, unless we get more testing, unless we get a commitment to isolate, unless we get a commitment to quarantine, then this is what we'll do. And none of that is happening. No one in this country is being prepared right now to do what you did in your bedroom for 2 weeks, which is to go and stay in that bedroom. If we were talking about that and said, look, the moment you have a virus, you're the one that's quarantined, and we're going to now start quarantining people. And for a lot of people, they can't do it at home. I mean, not everyone has the capacity to quarantine at home. So you'd have to have, like they did with tuberculosis, like infirmaries, places where you go. And that's where you're being housed. And all that was stuff I thought a month and a half ago was going to be rolled out. I thought all of that was in play. I thought they're going to be putting hospitals at shopping malls. I thought they're going to be taking over hotels as quarantine places. And they were going to take this thing like a pandemic because that's what the pandemic protocol said. And instead, holy moly, we're running Zoom meetings.
Yeah. And I think those things are all happening to different degrees in different parts of the country. Mm-hmm. Right. Like there seems to be so much more state by state comparison, state by state variations, right? Like the reason my son had to go back to New Jersey to his dorm was to clear it out so that the National Guard could turn it into a hospital.
Yeah.
So like in New Jersey, they are building out that capacity in large part because they've been pushed into a place where they have to. And
right, that's the thing, is that like
realities.
I mean, they've reached a breaking point, right? And like you say, most of the places aren't doing anything like it to prepare for it, so that when we reopen, we're ready for it. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be happening. Yeah. It's almost like people talk about this as if it is a weather system, like a hurricane. Like hunker down, and once the hurricane weather system passes through, then we can all come back out. Even though it's a natural disaster-like experience, it's not like a hurricane. The virus is still around and people still have it.
Right.
And they're going to keep passing it. There is no window of time when you've bent the curve. Is not like, well, now the virus has subsided. And I really think that's what people are hearing. I think they're hearing the virus is going away. I don't think they're hearing we've figured out how to keep people from being hospitalized at such a high rate. I think bend the curve for people, they're hearing, not hospital admissions because we're keeping people from needing to be hospitalized. I think they're understanding it as it's passing. I think the president might think that it's passing. That's even more terrifying. But
yeah. And the reality is that it's still, a lot of people are going to get sick. A lot of people are going to get this. It's just trying to keep it manageable and at manageable levels for the healthcare system to be able to handle. We'll see how that comes out. But I mean, you're right. All these things and all the things that I did, I was able to do because I carry a shit ton of privilege. Right? Like
totally.
I make enough money. I have a job that I can work remotely. In Dallas especially, we are seeing overwhelmingly higher both infection rate as well as hospitalization rate, ICU, mortality rate. All those things are way disproportionately higher among Black and brown communities than they are white. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are wrapped up in that. And we're seeing that nationally too, but Dallas is seeing a very amplified effect.
Yeah, and look, if this thing hits what we refer to as the essential workers, man, it's people in transportation, people in the food service, people in the medical industry, any of that. I just think, wow, that is really going to cripple this, because some people have certain skills and like certain tech skills that are highly sought, but all of that rests on the back of essential workers that make the rest of the society function, garbage collectors and people in sanitation and infrastructure and all the kind of non-glorified jobs. Man, if this virus starts to move through those communities and people are infected, there's not people to do that. Those are not work at home jobs. You just, I don't know. This is, and then again, maybe it won't spread at that same rate. Maybe we can keep mitigation down, but it feels to me like it's either mitigation, quarantining, or the economy. I don't know how we put all those together in a way that they all work. I don't see it. So I think people like you are the or hopefully the best good news people have heard all day, instead of listening to diarists like me tell you that the world's going to end. That people
keep checking in on John Krasinski. He's doing a good job putting some good news out there.
Oh, good. Good. Well, hey, thank you to you. Any best advice for anyone who does have the misfortune of taking on this virus and it doesn't need to be hospitalized? Did you learn anything that you're like, here's the thing I hope people know if they're staying at home, like eat ice chips or
I'm not sure I found any like magic cures. Tylenol is totally your friend. Lean into that. It's great. But yeah, I mean, it's just stay with it. And one of the a good piece of advice that was given to me by, my friends who are doctors is like, keep a low threshold of when you decide like, I'm having too hard of a time breathing, I'm going to go to the hospital. Because that doesn't necessarily mean they're putting you on a ventilator. Usually it means they're going to give you oxygen, and that's just going to help you feel better.
Did you ever feel that you were pushing that edge of not being able to breathe well enough and might need oxygen?
Yeah, the second day of deep symptoms, I was on the edge of going to the hospital or not to get some oxygen, because it was, I mean, the thing about it, and it's not hard to see how this is life-threatening to people, even though I never really felt like my life was threatened. It's not hard at all, because I mean, when it's really in its fullest amount, you're choosing every breath. Like every time I breathed in, it was, okay, I'm going to do this now. And then breathe, because you feel it, because it hurts. And I grew up with asthma. I never experienced this kind of pain or constriction in breathing. Like you're fighting against your body to take a breath. And
tell me about that. Is that because it was hard to breathe? Because it was painful to breathe? What was the breathing experience?
Both. I mean, I've really struggled to figure out how to liken it, because I haven't had it in any other setting. But it's both. Like, especially if every now and then I would take a deep breath to kind of catch up, and then I would feel like sharp pain here and then at the bottom of my lungs. Yeah, I mean, just taking a normal breath, you had to choose to do it because your body wasn't like, oh yeah, let's just keep breathing.
Wow. Well, hey, I'm so glad you're feeling better and able to breathe, and that you have the antibodies.
Yeah.
Pastor Mike Baughman, if you're ever in Dallas and it's appropriate to go to Union, the finest coffee shop in Dallas.
Thank you, sir.
I think you should go. All right, buddy.
Absolutely. Would love to have you all there. And thanks, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Well, of course, a pleasure.